Beta Upsilon Chi presents Man to Men, the premier audio journal for men who live faithfully and lead courageously. I'm Jared Musgrove with you for another Lead Courageously conversation, and today we welcome back Dr. Greg Wilson, author, licensed professional counselor, and leader of Soul Care Associates, here today to talk with us about AI and companionship. Greg, welcome back.
Yeah, it's a hot topic, Jared.
Man, it is. I wanted to open today because I recently, just a couple weeks ago at the time of this recording, I was sitting with a group of Christian nonprofit leaders from around the country, and we were sitting with who I would just call an AI leader. He's a Christian man who's leading in this space, and he was telling us a personal story that he said, essentially, my daughter goes to Alexa first now with her questions. She's about 10 years old.
Wow.
This is from his own mouth. She has formed a relationship with this AI, and guess what? It responds to her questions a lot faster than her dad. And he goes,
Yeah, when you said my daughter, I was kind of picturing, college age or high school or whatever, 10 years old.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And so, man, that I cannot think of a more frontline conversation we could be having right now. Obviously, this is maybe not for the 10-year-old girls out there, although I know we got some dads that are in that space. And this was one dad sharing, but I cannot think of a more important conversation to have really at this moment. I know, Greg, you're at the front lines working with young men and families. I wanted to ask just if that story resonated with you, or how AI specifically is shifting the way of what you're or just shifting what you're seeing in your counseling room.
It for sure is, Jared. And it depends on the person and where they're at in, stage of life and so forth. For example, this 10-year-old girl, she is growing up, and all of our kids really are growing up as digital natives. The digital world is very familiar to them because it's always been there. It's ubiquitous for them. Whereas, older, more, let's say more seasoned or more mature people like yourself and me, like we are what we would call digital immigrants. Like we're coming into this digital world in various stages of disbelief, concern, frustration, feeling the need to opt in so that we're not like left behind, And so, for example, younger people, the digital natives, if you will, online dating apps, again, it's ubiquitous to them. Social media, matchmaking online, digital interaction being constant, and like this man's 10-year-old daughter, normalized. So like I could ask dad or mom, or I could just ask Alexa, my friend Alexa, right? And so, it's more ubiquitous. It's more normalized. Obviously the pace of, digital relationships is much faster among the digital natives, if you will. It's not unusual for digital natives to get into conflict online, like to have these Twitter fights or, whatever. Whereas I find that like, I'm on Twitter or X, I guess we call it now.
Right.
I don't even know. I'm not even calling it by the right word anymore. But like I'm on that social media. I'm not there very often, but I am on it, and I do, put things there. But I'm always amazed at like how many people will have like a Twitter fight with someone like Elon Musk that they don't know, but it's just that, but they treat like, again, younger digital natives will consider anybody to be someone that like they could potentially have some kind of relationship with, based simply on the fact that, well, we're both on this platform, X or Twitch or Instagram or whatever it is. And so, people will talk to other people, celebrities, famous musicians or actors or whatever, like as if they know them, hey,
Yes.
bro, love the new album, or whatever. It makes it sound like, if it's a comment to an Instagram post, it makes it sound like you've been friends for years. You don't even know that person. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think, all people who are digital immigrants, um, might say, people like me, we might say, hey, I would prefer to have a direct conversation with you than just a digital conversation. I mean, honestly, Jared, what you and I are doing right here is actually a pretty good example of this, because it was just a couple of weeks ago, you and I were having lunch at a local place here in the area because we happen to live in the same general area. Um, we're now having a digital conversation, which for what you're trying to do with the podcast makes total sense. But I think both of us would say, sitting down at that restaurant, over a meal across a table from each other was more, infinitely, probably more satisfying to actually be doing that. But
Mm.
again, I don't know, for my daughter who graduates from college in a few weeks,
Yeah.
I mean, she does enjoy being with her friends for sure, face to face. But I don't know if she would say that this kind of an interaction is all that strange for her, unlike, it is a little bit more different for me. So,
I mean, just in general, we could certainly start with identity. I mean, as far as the families, and particularly for the sake of our audience, the men that you're seeing,
yeah.
are you seeing the digital space shift the way that they approach identity or relationships or their community?
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, I would tend to say, if I'm thinking of someone who's a role model or someone that I would call a mentor, um, I would never, I would never use those kinds of terms: role model, mentor, um, y- you know, like that kind of a descriptor for someone who is a social media influencer or an online personality, a blogger or a podcast host or whatever.
Would you include a podcasted preacher in that?
Yeah, I think
Mm.
that's really good. Like I would say, I mean, I have listened to that's a great point. I'm glad you said that. There are a lot of preachers that I have listened to that I've gained a lot of value from, who are not preachers who I could like physically sit under their teaching or actually be a member of their church.
Mm.
And I would say I've learned something from them, but I would hesitate to call them a mentor or a role model. But I mean, you and I both know we can think of several, you know, podcasted pastors that you and I both know who people would say, this person has been kind of a mentor to me.
Yeah.
Now, again, I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm just saying that for someone who is more, if we keep looking at that um, digital immigrant versus digital native framework, for those of us who are digital immigrants, I think we would have to say, like, I could name Ray Ortland, for example. So, I mean, Ray Ortland's definitely a father figure. He is a godly man. He is someone that I have gained a lot from. I couldn't bring myself to call him like a mentor,
Mm.
really, because I don't know him, you know? I don't like, I think I've met him once or twice and we're places where our paths have crossed, but
Yeah.
I still wouldn't say that I know him, but he's a godly man. Now I think for someone to be a mentor or really be influential in my life in a significant way, I at 62 years old would want to sit with that person and know them. That's just
Mm.
what I'm more comfortable with. However, in this age, that is certainly not the case. And there are plenty of people who would identify Ray as a mentor, though they have never met him, though they've read his books, seen him on podcasts. And so, yeah, so that's a really good point. So I also think that the way that we present ourselves, our own identity, if you will, while we're thinking about identity, um, the digital native, the person who's more comfortable in digital spaces is going to be more natural at presenting themselves through some kind of curated profile, um, maybe even an image that they've created on, for themselves on Instagram or TikTok or Twitch or, you name the platform, because there's so many of them, or even a self image that is filtered in some way by AI itself. Whereas, for me and my contemporaries, we would still, I think, focus on what we would call authenticity, less focused on creating some kind of a digital persona. Um, so, so yeah, I mean, I also think that there is, along with that, there is for younger men, for the digital natives, there is sometimes I see a pressure to maintain a certain kind of image online, um, an idealized self, if you will, that they're trying to present online.
Yeah.
Whereas, um, with older men, I think what we find is that there is more kind of, um, I don't know, existential questioning it within relationship. Jared, I don't really know who I am at this stage of my life, now that the kids are grown and those kinds of things. And whereas I think that with younger people, what I tend to see, again, these are broad stereotypes, but what I tend to see is a little bit more of like a curated kind of image, community, um, you know, uh, if we're talking about the digital natives, I mentioned, Twitch. So we're going to be thinking about like online gaming kinds of communities.
Yes. Big one.
Like a lot of gamers use Discord for that kind of thing. Communities form there, very niche based communities, this certain game or this certain interest or whatever. Whereas, among my older clients, the digital immigrants, it is more established circles of, the people that are in your neighborhood, the people that go to your church.
Yeah.
Those kinds of, and it's not as niche. And often you might find yourself in a home group with people who don't even understand what World of Warcraft is, or whatever, much less like want to play it, much less like being in a forum of other people who are like really good at playing it. And so, so all of that plays in, I think.
That lays the groundwork, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot there.
Going even deeper, you mentioned several times a lot of us, both digital immigrants and digital natives, will curate a digital identity or presentation of ourselves. And Greg, what happens when the identity, the persona is completely digital? Because that's what we're running into now. So in your counseling work, I guess just to begin, pick up where you started, because I think there is an arc here that kind of gets us to this point. From your counseling work, why do you think young men, particularly, or even just men even our age, are vulnerable to things like an AI girlfriend or virtual intimacy, which is what we're seeing an increase of?
Right. Well, I know you saw this because you and I were interacting a little bit via email before this, but like literally just this past week, Meta announced this new app that they have. By the way, they're not the first on the space. There are a number of virtual companion apps that are already out there, but they just announced, their new AI digital companion as we're taping like this past week. that the idea is to provide users with more personalized, social and interactive AI experience, powered by their specific large language model underneath that they use. But yeah, it's and I saw, as a matter of fact, Jared, right after you and I think it was right after, maybe right before you and I had that little interaction. Mark Zuckerberg was on, I think it was Theo Vaughn's podcast, wearing his glasses. So have you seen? So Meta has these really advanced looking. We're not talking about virtual reality, headgear like we've seen in the past. Like really, the glasses that look similar to yours and mine, but they are like they're powered by AI. So he's wearing those glasses and he's talking about this new product. And so yeah, it's here. And I think that a lot of what's behind this shift is what a lot of people are noticing, that for whatever reason, I'm not really even sure. Did it start with the pandemic? I couldn't tell you for sure. I'm not that kind of a social scientist. I see what I see in my practice. And so most of my research in that way is anecdotal. But what we certainly have seen is some kind of a shift. My alma mater, Baylor, has been a part of a major global longitudinal study with Harvard called the Global Flourishing Study. And what they have found is that people flourish, again, not too surprisingly, especially for people like you and I and the things that we've done. People flourish. They live happier, healthier, better lives if they have strong social connections.
Yeah.
If they feel connected socially. And so I do believe that, if you go back to, especially again, if you go back to COVID and a lot of the isolation that happened there does seem to be increasing rates of loneliness and social isolation. There tends to be more seeking of connection. And, a lot. And the reality is that these bots, if you will, these companion bots, they are available 24/7. They're available whenever you need them. They can be customized to be the exact appearance and or personality that you desire, basically to create kind of an idealized, partner or companion or even counselor.
Yeah.
I know even in my, in what I do for a living as a counselor, people are now, the conversation is, is AI going to take our jobs?
Yeah. Yep.
The conversation is everywhere. This past weekend, I was with a seminary professor who said this is the number one conversation that we're having on our seminary campus among the faculty and the staff and the administration is AI. Not just how do we make sure that people aren't using AI to write their papers,
right?
But the positive aspects of AI. So I would be remiss, Jared, if I didn't say that for someone to go on Mark Zuckerberg's new app and, playing around with it, say, you know what, I want to have a conversation with this bot. Maybe this person even is in training for ministry or even counseling ministry specifically. And they say, you know what, I want to have a conversation with this bot where this bot is going to challenge some of the things that I say, So maybe it's going to be an evangelism conversation or whatever. And this bot, I'm going to ask the bot, just throw everything at me, I'm making stuff up here, Jared, but like, I'm just going to say to the bot, just throw all the arguments at me. Let me see how I'm doing. Let me work on how I can improve. That's not a bad use of AI. That could be a very positive use of AI. I've thought similarly. That's why I connected the dots in what I'm saying here to counseling. Like I have had the thought as a counselor who supervises other counselors, a positive ethical use of AI might be to say to the bot, hey, I want you to come in presenting treatment resistant depression. You've tried everything, and now you're coming here. And so I'm going to do what I have been trained to do. And I'm going to ask you to just like throw at me well, I've already tried that, Greg. That'd be a great idea. But, and like really make me think about how I could help someone in this space better. Again, that would be a positive ethical use. So I don't think what we want this conversation to be is these two old guys, particularly like this one very old guy and then this older guy telling younger men, hey, stay away from AI. It could be really bad, right? Like there are some
as if that would do any good anyway.
Right. There are some very positive applications for AI. And yet, like I saw, maybe you saw it too recently. There was a clip on one of the morning shows where a guy had said, this is my AI girlfriend. He was being introduced. This is my AI girlfriend. Talked about the things that they talk about and all that. And then they said, now we want to introduce you to, we'll call him Bob's actual girlfriend. So Bob had a girlfriend, a real girlfriend, who was actually a part of the interview and was actually fine with the fact that he has this AI girlfriend and is talking about like all of these, really kind of vulnerable things with. My wife, Jared, would not be okay with that. I know your wife. I don't think she would be either.
Oh, no.
Right. So again, like there are some very negative, unhelpful issues, and then there are some potentially really positive issues that I think we want to lean into. Another one that I think about, I just had this thought was, sometimes people will say, I've heard this in counseling. People will say, well, I have this person that I talk to, this AI bot it's not a person, but this AI bot that I talk to. That's the danger, right? What I just slipped into is that we began to think of Alexa or this bot or whatever as an actual person. They're not an actual person. But I have this bot that I talk to. And the reason I talk to this bot is because, man, Greg, I have a hard time expressing my emotions. I have a hard time like really being emotionally vulnerable. And the real human girlfriends that I've had, or the real human women that I've been attracted to that haven't maybe become a girlfriend yet, but that I've spent time around, they want me to like be able to be emotionally vulnerable. And I just don't want to do that. So I would rather, I would rather do it with this bot that I can kind of train to be as emotionally, frozen, if you will, or whatever, as I am. Right. And so, again, that would be one of those things where it's like, okay, I get that like you find this helpful because you can have conversations with this bot that would be hard for you to have with an actual human female, in this case, perhaps. But I also think that like interacting with a real human person would be really helpful for you because you need to be able to grow out of some of that emotional inflexibility that you have and be able to be more emotionally versatile. And you can't do that with a bot that has been trained to be exactly like you, like you want it to be. In fact, at this point now, this conversation that we're having about AI companions becomes very similar to the conversation that we've had for years about pornography,
Yeah,
where
I can see
like
that.
you are you can pick and curate the exact kind of relationship that you want to have. The other person in the relationship can be a blonde versus a brunette. They can be,
Mm,
tall versus short, whatever. Whereas like um, in actual human relationships, that is not usually what ends up happening.
right.
And you and I both know that one of the things that the Lord does from a Christian perspective in relationships is he will use relationships. Our wives, we would say that the Lord has done that with us. Our children, we would say that the Lord has done that with both of us. The Lord uses these relationships with people who are
Mm,
lovely, wonderful people, but they're not exactly like us. And we have not been able to control them
mm.
or curate them into being a certain type of way. And we have to learn how to deal with this wonderful human being in ways that we're not used to having to deal with someone before. And we would call that, you and I would call that sanctification.
Oh,
Like
yes.
that's something that the Lord uses to sanctify us in those relationships. But if you can curate the
Mm,
I keep wanting to say person because that's what it feels like to me, and I keep having to push back against the word. This is not a person, but if you can curate the entity or whatever we're calling that thing to be exactly what you need it to be, yes, it would be very satisfying
yeah.
potentially, at least in the
Mm,
short run.
yeah.
But it would look a lot more like pornography
Mm,
and fake intimacy and false intimacy versus true intimacy.
yeah.
And I think that the Lord always wants us to move towards true intimacy in that respect with the people that we love the most. And so that's where I see it as a negative in my practice.
Yeah.
But can it be I'm gonna test drive this approach to sharing the gospel with an AI bot? Would
Mm,
that be great use? Heck yeah, that'd be awesome.
mm,
I've got some ideas for this paper that I'm thinking about, doing on this topic at school. I've got some various ideas. I kind of just want to talk it over with someone or with, again, not someone, but with an
yeah.
with this bot. I just want to have a
Right.
conversation with this AI and let it spit back some ideas. Yeah, that's great. And I think those are the kinds of uses that people are finding and discovering that can
Yep.
be really helpful. So, and
No,
that's the conversation
same.
in all these at universities. I know Bucks is obviously a very university driven organization. At universities, at seminaries, and all kinds of organizations, the conversation is about how can this be done? How can AI be used ethically and helpfully versus unethically and unhelpfully?
Yeah. No, and I'm appreciating everything you're bringing to this because I'm learning as you go along of helpful uses and also just things to be on the lookout for. You mentioned one of the morning shows a few minutes ago. I think we were watching the same one. They were interviewing, and I don't know, I can't remember if it was the same guy, but it was a guy who basically said this stuck with me, and I think I shared it with you. Um, this the guy they were interviewing. It says so and so. Jason. It says Jason knows the AI relationship isn't real, but says the feelings are.
Yes.
That is striking to me. Can you help us just as a counselor, like do some soul care there as you begin to recognize maybe, if Jason's sitting with us and he says, I know it's not real, but the feelings are. How do we begin to trace that out?
Yeah, that's you're right. And that is a very that quote is is interesting. So here's what I would say to Jason. Here's what I was thinking as I read that. Your feelings are real. This bot doesn't have feelings.
Mm.
And so it is like, yes, you are feeling a certain type of way, being able to share your true feelings or your true emotions with this AI companion, but real intimacy is more like, and again, Jason, you're right. Jason, actually, it's the same show. Jason had a real girlfriend who also showed up, on camera at some point. And by the way, she said, we have a great relationship. It's the best relationship I've ever been in. So she was very complimentary of Jason. She didn't have like these huge concerns about him doing this. But what I would point out to Jason, if Jason and his real girlfriend were in my office, I can't remember her name, is, your feelings are real, and her feelings, your real girlfriend's feelings are real, but this AI girlfriend doesn't have feelings. And so you have a relationship with this AI girlfriend that's very one way. It's very one-sided. It's very one-dimensional. And unfortunately, that really is like, even the word relationship or companionship is really not even the right word for what you have for this. Now, again, I'm not saying, especially his girlfriend was fine with it. So, I'm not saying that that Jason should necessarily, I mean, again, I don't know all the things that he's doing with this AI bot, right? So but I'm not right. saying on the surface of what I know that he should necessarily stop having conversations with this bot. There could be things that are very helpful there. For example, he could be talking to this bot just like a guy might talk to another, even though this was a girlfriend, he presented as a girlfriend, but he could be having conversations that were just like a guy might have with a girl who's a friend, and say like, this is something I want to say to my girlfriend, but I'm not sure, if that would be, if she would take it the right way or whatever. Can you help me with that's another use that I've actually seen in my counseling practice, is that people will have conversations with this AI bot. Should I talk about this with my wife, or should I not talk about this with my wife? Should I, if I'm going to bring this up with my wife, how should I bring it up with my wife? Honestly, the same kinds of conversations that people do have with counselors, or that people have with other trusted friends, male or female.
Right.
And, if that's what he's doing, then maybe the fact that he has this bot in his life, as strange as that language may sound to you and I, may really be one of the things that's contributing to the overall health of the relationship, as defined by his girlfriend, who says that like it's a great relationship. So, but it's still, if he was sitting in my counseling office, I would still say what makes a human relationship a relationship is that there are two ways of being that are coming into that relationship. There are two types of feelings. He might be having a type of feeling about something, but his girlfriend might be feeling a totally different way about it. And again, from a Christian worldview, we would call that sanctification. We would say that that's a really good thing, that, even though it might be hard, even though that conversation, the conversation between Jason and his real girlfriend, may be a lot harder conversation. In fact, judging,
almost certainly,
right? Judging as a person who does a lot of relationship counseling, those conversations are going to be a lot harder. Why? Because you have to think about the other person, and the other person has feelings too, and their feelings might be quite different than yours. Jason doesn't have that problem with his AI bot. He doesn't have that problem. That can be a benefit in terms of like being able to vet some ideas by I don't even know. I don't even know how to use the pronoun. But he can run some things by this bot without any of the emotional baggage, and then go, oh, you're right. Like that's not going to work with my wife or with my girlfriend. I probably need to like change the way that I do that. Thank you very much, Samantha, or whatever he calls his bot. And then he goes and he has the conversation with his girlfriend or his wife. And so again, I want to highlight there are positive uses, and I don't want to make it sound like everything is negative about these, but that certainly would be a concern because again, it's the same. It's like pornography. You are able to curate this one-way relationship that you have. I mean, what Jason said could easily be said about pornography.
Mm-hmm.
My feelings are real. This person on the screen isn't real, at least to me. But my feelings are very real. That could be said about pornography. That doesn't make it
right.
Doesn't make it a good thing, certainly. And what is missing is a recognition, especially from a Christian worldview. What's missing is a recognition of the humanness of the other person in the room. Obviously, with pornography, that would take the form of even though this person on this screen or in this chat room or whatever is not real to me, they are real. They are somebody's daughter, somebody's sister, friend, whatever. And so I think that's I'm maybe rambling on a little bit too much here, but I think that's the point, is that, like, Jason, your feelings are real. The bot doesn't have feelings. Your girlfriend does. Interactions with your girlfriend, while harder, are going to be more helpful for you long term, because it is you and your feelings and her feelings trying to navigate a path forward.
Yeah. No, I don't think you're rambling, because there's so many side roads and entries and exits that you can take off of this conversation, because we're all learning. It strikes me, Greg, we talked earlier about, I opened the show with just sharing this experience with this AI expert that said his daughter will usually and increasingly go to Alexa to ask questions, because Alexa responds faster than her dad. Alexa doesn't have to say, let me think on that, or let me get back to you. Let me pray about that.
Right.
Immediately gives an authoritative answer.
Right.
We've talked some about romantic relationships. I wonder if we could continue a thread that we opened up early with it, which is mentorship.
Yeah. Because
something you said as we were talking about the feelings are real there was a recent clip of John Piper at the Gospel Coalition. Speaking of mentors, a lot of our guys have been impacted by Piper's ministry in one way or another.
Oh yeah.
And he's sharing how he went into ChatGPT, asked it to write a theologically informed prayer. I think in the vein of Don Carson or someone like that.
That's right.
And it gave this wonderful prayer. He read it and he said, but here's what AI can't do. It can produce words. It can produce words better than you or I could.
And faster.
But it can but it cannot feel.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I saw that clip as well. And obviously John Piper's also been he's another one of those people for me, right? Like, I've never actually personally met John Piper, but I would definitely, I've been discipled under him for sure. In a lot of ways, reading his books. I always tell people that when I get that question, it gets asked in a lot of places. What book has been most influential to you besides the Bible? Desiring God is that book for me. I mean, that's my answer for that. So huge John Piper fan and appreciator of him, and I've learned a lot from him. And he's exactly right. It goes back to what we were just talking about. The bot doesn't have feelings. So going back to your 10-year-old girl example at the beginning, my question for her or for the dad would be, okay, what kinds of questions is your daughter asking Alexa?
Yeah.
If she's asking, hey, Alexa, what is the current movie rated, within these boundaries that my parents have set for me, that has the highest score on Rotten Tomatoes,
Right.
or something like that. Like if
Right.
if she's asking Alexa, a question like that, the way that she would ask her dad that question is like, hey dad, what's a good movie that I can see that is, rated in the ways that you guys would want me to
Yeah.
watch a movie that's like really, really good. And the dad might really have to think about that. I mean, he might go, I don't know.
Yeah.
But like that 10-year-old girl can get a curated list. By curated, I just mean within the ratings parameters that the parents have set, if that's what she asked for, Rotten Tomatoes being the scoring system or whatever. And she can get a top 10 list, and then she can go to dad and mom and say, have you seen any of these movies? What movies should we watch on our Friday night movie night together as a family? I've got a list here. That would be a great use of her asking questions of Alexa. In fact, honestly, the dad might end up asking Alexa that question in terms of trying to answer it for the daughter.
Totally.
On the other hand, if she's asking dad, what do boys look for in a girl? What do Christian boys look for in a girl that they want to date? Or, what is what are the things that I need to be thinking about she's 10 years old. So as I'm just kind of coming into this pre-adolescence / adolescence, pubescent season, like what are the things that I need to be thinking about in terms of relationship? That dad would be horrified if he thought Alexa was giving her advice on that, or that the internet was giving her advice on that, or that some of these hyper masculine blogs on the internet might be giving her advice on. You know what I'm saying? So like, I mean, there are certain dark corners of the internet that we would not want that 10-year-old girl or even anybody to be like getting advice from those kinds of places. But you can bet that within an AI algorithm, that some of those spaces could end up creeping in, and that's what you want to be super careful of. So, the question would be, what kinds of questions is she getting Alexa to? I'm trying to fix my Switch. It's got this kind of a problem.
Right.
Those Nintendo Switches. Like I'm trying to fix my Switch.
Yep.
Like it's got some kind of a problem. Sure. I mean, again, dad might have to ask Alexa or the internet that question to get an answer to help his little girl. Right. So that's, and we're going to see that's going to become more and more ubiquitous. And that's where parents, if I could just say this to the dads out there that are listening, parents need to be really careful about the ways. So to this man's credit, he knows that his daughter is asking these questions of Alexa. It sounds like he has some idea, based on, that this is his area of expertise, the kinds of questions that he's asking her. And if he's asking Alexa questions that dad's going to have to ask Alexa or the internet anyway, and she knows how to interact with that in such a way to be very careful, and that there are parameters around that. And hopefully there is a parent around somewhere close by for those interactions. Like, that's the world we live in. That's the world that anybody who has a 10-year-old boy or girl or younger, that's the world we're in, is that now there is this other presence in your home in the form of the internet, however you let that presence in. And it's being used. It's being used. I mean, my daughter asks a lot of questions on the internet, I am hoping that she asks, and again, she's in college, but like, I'm hoping that she asks the kinds of questions that, she would know, hey, this one requires wisdom. I'm going to go to dad or mom for this kind of question.
Yeah.
But if it's like how to do a certain thing or whatever, that's the world we live in.
Yeah. It is. So,
Yeah.
and maybe this is how we end this one, because I think this is such a big question. We're going to keep coming back to it
Okay.
in these little chats that we're having together. But maybe just to begin landing today, and I may be opening up another can of worms, but I think that you're laying down some principles that we can use for this next scenario. Let's say I want to be mentored by AI, because that's what a lot of men feel that they are missing. And I'm even just thinking about, people we've mentioned on this podcast is I want to build a bot that can mentor me, like Ray Ortland, John Piper.
Right.
And man, let's just throw in like Augustine,
right.
In
there.
You go. It's like pick your theological
heroes,
spiritual Mount Rushmore. And you know what? Why not a little Eugene Peterson and maybe the preacher that you love listening to?
Sure.
So throw them all in. And I'm building this mentorship bot. What are wise uses of something like that? And when do we need to start getting concerned that I'm putting a little more trust in this than I should?
If I were going to try to build an AI mentor, number one, I mean, you pick some really good. So you a lot of times, again, I'm not an expert on how in fact, you sitting with that AI expert that you were sitting with, you may have more knowledge than I have on this. But what I know is that, what it knows is what you feed into the model, right? And what's already been fed into the model. And so, if I were going to try to build something like that, I would probably be looking for, okay, these are the voices that I trust. I trust Ray Ortland. I trust John Piper.
Man, I don't know. Let's reach back a while. Let's just say Charles Spurgeon.
Charles Spurgeon,
right?
Great. See,
sky's the limit with these bots.
Yeah. Charles Haddon Spurgeon. I don't know, Augustine, perhaps. Okay.
Yeah. Old school.
Give me some Martin Lloyd Jones. Give me some practices that have been time tested by these people. So spiritual practices that I could build into my life. And so you're going to ask the bot about those things. You're going to say, I want to grow in the use of spiritual practices, things like reading the word, prayer, contemplation, confession, those kinds of things. I want to build some spiritual habits, meditating, memorizing the word of God, those kinds of things. What are some things that those people and people like them have found to be helpful? Like, that would be great. And then you could have the conversation that, you have with, okay, well, it's great that this particular person got up at 4:00 in the morning. I'm not a morning person. That's not going to work for me. Are there some habits are there some people who talked about things that they did at night that would be good, or like throughout the day, or those kinds of practices? And you could have a very potentially robust conversation with this AI mentor, so to speak, on spiritual discipline, spiritual habits. Don Whitney, could put Don Whitney in there if that's the conversation that we're having.
Right. You could throw in Richard Foster or
Richard Foster. Right. And so, what are some things that people have done throughout the ages? Right. So now, as you and I have collaboratively built this list, we've got really current people, and we've got people from a little further back, and then we've got ancients. Right. And so that would be, I would love to sit in on that conversation. I think that would be a really helpful conversation. That would be in some ways like sitting down with a historian, a Christian historian who has studied this idea of spiritual practices over the years. And you could have a great conversation there that would be extremely enlightening, where you want to actually have the real John Piper or Ray Ortland, or Don Whitney, or someone like that.
Yeah.
It could be, if you're on a college campus right now, it could be one of the professors at your campus who you know to be a Christian. It could be an older, wiser man at your church. Where you want that is, again, going back to what Piper said. This bot can give me this prayer in the style of Don Carson. What it can't do is give me the emotion, and I would even go deeper and further and say, and the wisdom, and the insight and the discernment of Don Carson, right? Like, it's not going to have all that. And don't forget, I mean, even this is one of the conversations that I've had when we have this conversation in the mental health world, where Christian counselors are saying, man, is AI going to take over what we do? The Holy Spirit, the AI does not have the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
So, brother listening to this podcast, if you're thinking about using AI for some of these uses, we've named several that are really good and that would be helpful. We're not against doing that. However, one of the things that you need to realize is that the real human being that you're thinking about having as a mentor, this pastor at your church, or this parent, or this older, wiser professor at your school, or whoever that person is. This person, if they're a believer, they have the Holy Spirit of God.
Yeah.
And they are not just going to be parroting back information that has been gathered and then curated for you. They are going to be adjusting to you in real time in the conversation based on the Holy Spirit's promptings.
Yes.
And what they're hearing from you, which again, AI is going to try to mimic that. And I think as these large language models get much bigger and much better, Jared, I think that AI is going to get really, really good at mimicking that. Listening. So it's a far better listener, honestly, than some of us are, which is something we should all work on. But it's still, what it's still missing, especially if we're talking about discipleship and mentoring, is the presence of the Holy Spirit listening and discerning and saying, Jared, here's what I'm hearing you ask for that is maybe a little bit concerning to me. Even something as simple as like pushing back on, hey, maybe 4:00 in the morning is never going to be your jam. But what I'm hearing you say is that you're sleeping until 10 or 11. And I don't know if that's going to be the best use of your day either. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like that conversation led by the Spirit is still going to be a more helpful conversation, at least for a long, long time, than anything that AI is ever going to be able to do. For sure, AI is never going to be able to mimic the Holy Spirit in a believer's life.
So good. No, I think that's a great place to leave it there for today. I have a feeling that AI will continue to be a topic of conversation in these check-ins that we have, Greg.
Yeah.
So thanks again for your wisdom today, brother.
I think so too. My pleasure.
Well, guys, we will be back with Greg here pretty soon to talk about this topic and others just on these continued soul care check-ins. I want you to know that in the meantime, Man to Men is powered by Beta Upsilon Chi, commonly referred to as Bucks. Everywhere, every day, Bucks men are raising families, leading organizations, and strengthening churches to impact our communities for Christ. You can find out more about Beta Upsilon Chi by transliterating our Greek letters and adding a .org. That's BYX.org. Man to Men is produced rather well, I might add, by the good gentlemen of the Good Podcast Company. For Beta Upsilon Chi, I'm Dr. Jared Musgrove with Man to Men.